Hi, and welcome back to the Wellness Junction podcast. My name is Jordana, and this is For You. For You is a segment of the Wellness Junction podcast where I share soft landings for when life gets tough. I share snippets from my life's experiences and lessons I have learned and continue to learn. This is not your average pep talk for here's how I made it and 10 steps you can take to make it too. My goal for sharing these experiences and lessons is solidarity, so that you can feel less alone when you are walking through similar or related experiences. So you can come here at the beginning of the day when you need that gentle yet firm push to get you out of bed in the morning, or in the evening when you need kind words to power you down to sleep, or just in the middle of the day when you need a quick break from the busyness of life just to feel a little more human. Today I am sharing a soft landing when it's hard to be away from home. On the 14th of September in 2023, I moved away from home. I remember hoping so hard in my heart that I would never have to go back under the same circumstances. I had been at home for what seemed like forever, and my life felt stagnant. My moving away was basically an attempt at me going back to school to complete the degree that I had begun a while back. And at this point, it had been dragging on for so long. My parents and siblings were crossing their fingers that this time, when I returned back home, I would do so in a graduation gown. I was optimistic with them. But at the back of my mind, just somewhere deep down in my heart, I had this lump of doubt as to whether I was going to make this happen. Because for me, this ride away from home was a new ticket to a new environment, because I had really been wishing and hoping and praying for some novelty, some newness to my life. So Meru, the town where my school is about 200 kilometers, which is about 5 hours by public transport, give or take, from Juja, which is the town where my family lives. And so I had lived in Meru for the better parts of around mid-2017 to the end of 2019, while I was in university when I started that degree. And then again from around mid-2021 to the end of 2022, while I was doing an internship program at a church. So just a side note here, I have shared a bit of my experience during this internship period at a church in the episode that is right before this, when I was talking about a crush that I had at the time and how it impacted my life. So check that out. I would highly recommend. Back to this episode. So I wasn't really new to this place. It's a place I had lived. It's honestly one of the places where I like to be. I had people who knew me, some friends from school who are still around, and the rest of the people actually just from my church community, because that's really just how my life doubled between school and church. Things would work out, when I was going back. I knew it would take me a lot of time, some time at least, to reintegrate back into my relationships, because I had been away for about 9 months. So I was mentally prepared for the first couple of months to be a bumpy start, so to speak. But listen, I could never have anticipated how hard that will turn out to be, reintegrating back into into the relationships I had, and just how settling back into this place that sort of had felt like home at some point. It turns out that 10 months is a really long time, and people's lives had moved on. Yeah, just the way life happens. People's lives had moved on. And so here I had moved away from our physical home with the hopes of finding a new home, so to speak, in a place that I liked to be at and with people that I liked to be around, only to realize that it was all in my head. It was made that much more difficult by the fact that none of my hopes panned out. The things I wanted to do, none of them really worked out. I had started a small business that collapsed almost immediately after starting. I had no breakthrough with school, and my relationships, as I was coming to realize, were a sham. And so all the hope and determination that I had for a new beginning while I was starting out this journey, they had just fizzled out in no more than about 4 months. And to top it all up, I started getting this nagging sense of the fact that maybe my return here wasn't so much a grand comeback, but the beginning of an end. At first, I couldn't even tell what really was instigating this. It was just like for example, this time when I was coming back from a catch-up date with one of my friends, and I was walking back home on this path that I had walked on almost 1,000,000 times, I just remember getting this sense in my bones that my stay here in this town was coming to an end. And that was like a week or 2 after I had just moved back. And so it was very conflicting and confusing because I had never really pictured myself living somewhere else, because I was like, if I'm not staying here, where else am I supposed to go to? But it turns out my gut instinct was right, because just 6 short months later, so I moved back in September, so that was like in February, when my hopes and dreams had seemingly crashed to the ground, and I found myself to the point where all the food I had in my house were cooking oil and salt. So it turns out, around 6 months later, I got an opportunity to move some 600 kilometers away from Meru again to Kisumu, which is where I currently live, or I currently operate from. It took me about 13 hours on the road, traveling from Meru to Kisumu. But when I landed in Kisumu, I sort of just knew that this was it. This is the home I had been looking for. There's just a way in which the physical location and just how I felt inside clicked. And it's like they agreed for the first time. And I felt like I had arrived home. I started by staying with my aunt. And I believe that she is such an important piece of she's such an important piece of this puzzle, because she's just one of the people in my life where I feel very comfortable and at home being around. We were both navigating our personal transition periods, and so we were really just helping each other to process where we are at, what had been going on, and how we wanted to move forward. So I share all this because one of the things that I really did struggle with was the idea of feeling at home, or maybe I was looking for a sense of belonging or a sense of connection to a place and to a people. And of course, my first attempt at this did not go as well as I had thought. I had left home. I was staying with my dad and one of my sisters at the time. And I really did hope that I will find what I was looking for in this new location, and nothing had panned out. And in a very interesting twist of events, I found myself moving away, which was something very unplanned. Location I had never really been at. The best I have ever stayed in Kisumu was like way back when I was young. I can't even remember what life used to look like, because it was such a long time ago. Given, I think, a few months or maybe 1 or 2 years after my mom had me, before I started going to school. I do reckon that the idea of home is one that I have struggled with for the longest time. As I shared in my previous episode, I spent majority of my childhood away from my parents. And I think that this being away specifically from my mom was the beginning of this dissonance in my heart constantly. Because I remember much of my childhood was just composed of this longing and this waiting for the day when I would finally be close to my mom, and I'd be living with my entire nuclear family. Because at some point I was staying with my grandmother, and my mom, my dad, and my 3 sisters were staying together in the city. And, of course, that really did hurt as a young person, because as I've shared, I really did struggle to understand why they would leave me behind, So after I finished my primary school, of course I moved to stay with my family, but somehow that feeling of longing, it never really just left me. It never really completely left. The thing I'm constantly learning is that being at home is more than just a physical place. There are for sure physical places that evoke feelings of calm and relaxation and a deep sense of peace. And I think the connection and a sense of belonging, so much so that they feel home. And a lot of time, though, we as a people have to create an internal sense of being at home in our bodies, in our minds, and in our souls, so that we feel at home no matter where we are, because life is constantly changing. And so if the a very much needed sense of peace and calm and serenity and belonging cannot just be tied to a single place or with one particular person or with one particular group of people. My life continues to change in ways that sometimes can be annoying, because for example, the way I moved in Meru to Meru thinking that will be the beginning of my life moving forward, and then shortly after I found myself needing to move again because just that is life. The winds of transition are constantly blowing at us, and we can choose to readjust our vessels and move with them, or we can choose to remain in the same place. If we choose to, we can't complain that we are not growing or we are not advancing or we are not progressing. No matter where we are, I think it helps us to realize that being rooted in our sense of identity and finding rooting in a sense of worth as a person will help us to navigate whatever external storms are brewing in the horizon. Because as you know, life, there is almost always a storm that's brewing in the horizon, whether you already see it or not. And by storm, I don't necessarily mean like bad happenings in life, just as I have said, the winds of transitions, they are always blowing our way at several instances in life. And so if our sense of belonging or connection or peace is tied to a specific group of people or a specific place, then we can really struggle to find our footing when we have to constantly be changing and growing. And I think specifically in young adulthood, because it is the season in our lives when a lot of things are changing, or when we are learning a lot about ourselves, about the people around us, and we're trying to set down our roots. And so if we cling on to one version of ourselves or one version of feeling at home in our spaces, then we can be at a loss when we feel like the ground beneath our feet is constantly changing. And maybe it is this idea of home that needs debunking. What exactly are we looking for when we are talking about home? I remember when I had moved back temporarily to Meru, I was hoping that the same people I had known and interacted with would be the same people that I would reconnect with. Even the reason what really inspired me to do this episode is I remember finding home in a new relationship, like someone I just met on this particular visit. And when I think about how we can make room for each other when we are in spaces, I think a lot about this time, because my new friend really did help me to feel more at home than the friends that I thought would. I think that we also need probably to, maybe I wasn't so much looking to reconnecting with the same old friends as much as I was just looking for a sense of belonging and a sense of connection. So it really does help when we are in new spaces, new realities, to figure out what would home feel like for me in this place. Maybe it is peace, maybe it is healing or acceptance or affection or unconditional love that we're looking for. And it really helps when we break it down to what exactly we mean when we are looking for home. Sometimes a place that you once called home ceases to be home for various reasons. Both a natural home or a proverbial home, because there's natural disasters, there's man-made disasters, and external and even internal conflicts that cause us to leave physical locations or cause us to leave relationships that we have relied on for such a long time. And so we have to go in search of a new quote-unquote home. Also, new opportunities for growth like work, marriage, relationships, or adventure can also be the reason why we move from one place to another. And it really is inevitable that at some point in life, we have to move around a bit. And so I am in solidarity with you today if you are longing to be home. Home physically, home in your body, home in your soul, home spiritually, home to a person or home to yourself. As the winds of transitions blow and bring with them unexpected changes, some which are welcome and some not so much, I hope that you can find somewhere to tether your identity, your sense of self, your hopes and your dreams. And more than that, I hope that you can find the home that your soul desires. I hope that today's episode has met you right where you are and that this was for you. Until the next time I'm in your ears, please remember I am for you. I'm in your corner and in solidarity with you always. So share this with a friend who you think is your home or who is in search of a home, and let them know that you're thinking about them. Thank you so much for your time here today, friend. And remember, you're treasured here. Okay, bye.